Before we begin, I thought I would add a little historical perspective to the challenges that we face right now. I think the stirring debates of Daniel Webster, the thunderous speeches of Frederick Douglass, and the inspiring writings of Harriet Beecher Stowe certainly were the catalyst for a great abolitionist movement in the mid-19th century. But it could have come to a screeching halt when probably the most painful and agonizing United States Supreme Court decision was rendered in 1857, when Dred Scott was denied the opportunity to escape slavery north of the 36th parallel. The Dred Scott decision, which is generally thought to have ruled on whether or not there could be slavery north of the 36th parallel, did not, in fact, do that at all. All the Dred Scott case did was to affirm that Dred Scott, since he was considered 3/5 of a man, had no right to sue in a federal court. Talk about adding insult to injury. The reality is that there was, at that time, probably no lower place for civil rights in this country, for human rights all over, than was experienced that day. Well, we know that eventually they freed the slaves, we fought and defeated integration, and now, for the first time in our country, we have an African-American president and 2 African-American governors. But I thought that I would note, before moving forward, the reality is that from that moment, that decision that made so many people feel helpless, to the moment when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, was in fact only 5.5 years, from the middle of 1857 to the beginning of 1863. And so, after the unfortunate accident of Proposition 8 that passed in California, it left a number of advocates in a place of complete confusion and stunned disbelief. Right here in New York, at that time, we were musing about when marriage equality would pass in the Senate. Then we changed it to whether or not it could pass in the Senate. Then the discussion became whether or not political opposition could stop a bill from coming to the floor in the Senate. And now, that devolving of energy has moved us to a place where we're actually debating whether or not the governor should introduce a bill on marriage equality, when in fact, the governor introduced a bill on the same issue in 2007. So what we have is not a crisis of issues, we have a crisis of leadership. We're going to fill that vacuum today. I'm putting a stop to it. I'm introducing a bill to bring marriage equality to the state of New York. On cue, as soon as he heard we were doing this, rushing to my defense, as he always does, the mayor of the city of New York, the Honorable Michael Bloomberg. This is a civil rights issue. For too long, gay and lesbian New Yorkers, we have pretended that they have the same rights as their neighbors and their friends. For too long, we have allowed the perception that gay and lesbian New Yorkers have the same privileges as their own straight brothers and sisters or mothers and fathers. That is not the case. Too many cannot even make medical decisions on the prospect of the care for their partners, nor can they visit them in the hospital. For too long, many of them can't even cover each other under insurance policies or health benefit plans. Many are denied the opportunity to even have rights of intestacy when their partner passes away. All have been the victims of what is a legal system that has systematically discriminated all of them. And too many loving families right here in New York State have not received the legal recognition that they actually deserve. Now, these issues are not common just to one group. These challenges are not limited to a special interest. All of us know the indignation that one feels from being victims of discrimination, and we have in our country a code, and we have an honor, and we have a duty to make sure that equality exists for everyone. Anyone that has ever experienced degradation or intolerance would understand the solemn duty and how important that it actually is. Anyone that has ever experienced anti-Semitism or racism, any New Yorker who is an immigrant who has experienced discrimination, any woman who has faced harassment at work or suffered violence at home, any disabled person who has been mocked or marginalized understands what we're talking about here. We have all known the wrath of discrimination. We have all felt the pain and the insult of hatred. This is why we are all standing here today. We stand to tell the world that we want equality for everyone. We stand to tell the world that we want marriage equality in New York State.